There is something strange that very few people ever notice. Civilizations separated by thousands of miles, speaking different languages, following different religions, and in many cases never having any contact with one another, all came to believe that death does not come alone. The Egyptians had Anubis, the Greeks had Thanatos, Japan had the Shinigami, India had Yama, and in Europe, people envisioned a skeletal figure cloaked in black, carrying the dreaded scythe of death. Why did completely different civilizations create their own guardians of death? Was it merely a coincidence? Or did humanity, thousands of years ago, already believe that there was something waiting for all of us at the end of the road? Azrael. In Islamic tradition, Azrael is the angel of death, though many people associate him with a darker, more reaper-like presence. He is described as an enormous being whose body spans the distance between heaven and earth, with one foot in the east and the other in the west. He holds the souls of all living things, and when a person's time comes, he simply withdraws that soul from the body. He is not evil in the traditional sense. He carries out a divine function, acting as the final messenger between the mortal world and whatever lies beyond. In some Jewish and Christian texts, he appears under similar roles, though his name and exact nature shift slightly across traditions. What makes Azrael stand out is that he is not feared as a monster, but respected as a necessary force. He does not pursue or hunt. He simply arrives. Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper is perhaps the most recognized death figure in the world, and yet he has no single origin. He grew out of European plague culture, particularly during the Black Death of the 14th century, when death became so constant and indiscriminate that people began to personify it. Artists started depicting a skeletal figure in a dark cloak, carrying a scythe, the tool of harvest, as a way of saying that death cuts down all living things the way a farmer cuts wheat. Over time, this image became fixed in Western imagination. He is not a demon in any religious text. He is more of a cultural symbol that hardened into a character. The scythe, the hourglass, the faceless dark figure. All of these elements came together gradually, borrowed from art, folklore, and the collective fear of dying without warning. Shinigami. Shinigami come from Japanese folklore and literally means death god or death spirit. Unlike the Grim Reaper, Shinigami are not a single being. They are a class of supernatural entities, sometimes working alone, sometimes in groups, and their personalities and appearances vary widely. In older Japanese folk belief, Shinigami were associated with suicide and were thought to lure people toward death, particularly near water or in moments of deep despair. In modern Japanese culture, through manga, anime, and fiction, they have been reimagined extensively. Some are portrayed as cold bureaucrats processing souls, others as reluctant figures bound to their duties. What stays consistent is the idea that they are beings tied specifically to the moment of death and the transition that follows, operating somewhere between a guide and a judge. Thanatos. Thanatos is the Greek personification of death, and he is notably gentle compared to many of his counterparts. He is the twin brother of Hypnos, the god of sleep, and that pairing is intentional. The Greeks saw death and sleep as deeply connected, both being states of stillness and unconsciousness. Thanatos was depicted as a winged youth, sometimes carrying a butterfly or an inverted torch, symbols of the soul departing and a flame going out. He was not feared the way other death-related figures were. In fact, the Greeks distinguished him from the Keres, violent death spirits, and from Hades, the ruler of the underworld. Thanatos represented peaceful, natural death, the kind that comes quietly at the end of a full life. He was the hand that closed the eyes, not the force that tore a soul away. Yama. Yama is the god of death in Hindu, Buddhist, and broader South and East Asian traditions, and he is one of the oldest death deities recorded in any religious text. In the Rig Veda, among the oldest sacred texts known, Yama is described as the first mortal to die, which is why he became the ruler of the dead. He judges souls after death, reviewing their actions in life and determining where they go next. He is typically depicted with green or dark skin, riding a black buffalo, carrying a noose and a staff. His court includes record keepers who track every deed a person has ever done. Yama is not cruel by nature. He is a judge, and he is bound by the same cosmic law he enforces. Across Buddhist traditions, his role shifts somewhat, but the core idea remains. He is the one who weighs what a life was worth. Anubis. Anubis is the jackal-headed god of ancient Egypt, and his role in death was more hands-on than most. He was not just a distant judge or a symbolic figure. He was present at the moment of burial, guiding the embalming process, and he stood in the hall of two truths where the soul was weighed. In that ceremony, the heart of the deceased was placed on a scale against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. Anubis oversaw the weighing. If the heart was heavy with guilt and wrongdoing, it was devoured by a creature called Amit, and the soul ceased to exist. If it balanced or was lighter, the soul passed into the afterlife. Anubis was also the protector of graves, which is why his image was placed on tombs. For Egyptians, death was a process that required care and precision, and Anubis was the one who made sure it was done right. Samael. Samael is a figure from Jewish mystical tradition, particularly from Kabbalistic texts, and he occupies a strange space between angel and demon. His name is sometimes translated as poison of God or blind God, and interpretations of him vary considerably. In some texts, he is the angel of death who carries out divine judgment. In others, he is a fallen figure associated with accusation and temptation, connected in some traditions to the role of Satan. What makes Samael interesting is that he is not purely evil, even in the darker interpretations. He exists within a system. He has a function. Some texts describe him as the angel assigned to certain nations or forces in the world, acting as both destroyer and accuser. He appears in the story of the binding of Isaac, in accounts of Moses' death, and in various apocalyptic writings. He sits at the edge between servant and rebel, which is why scholars still debate exactly what he is. Baron Samedi. Baron Samedi comes from Haitian Vodou and is one of the most visually striking death figures in any tradition. He is a Loa, a spirit that acts as an intermediary between the living and the divine, and he rules over the dead. He is depicted as a man in a top hat and black tailcoat, wearing dark glasses with one lens missing, his face painted like a skull. He smokes cigars, drinks rum, and speaks with vulgarity and dark humor. But beneath that theatrical appearance is something genuinely powerful. Baron Samedi decides who lives and who dies. If he refuses to dig your grave, you cannot die, which means he is also a figure associated with healing and the extension of life. He is not a reaper in the quiet sense. He is loud, present, and deeply tied to the community of the dead. In Haitian belief, the dead are not distant. They are neighbors, and Baron Samedi is their keeper. Izanami. Izanami is a goddess from Japanese Shinto mythology, and her connection to death is rooted in personal tragedy rather than cosmic duty. She was originally a creator goddess, working alongside her husband Izanagi to shape the islands of Japan and give birth to the gods. She died during the birth of the fire god Kagutsuchi, and after her death she descended into Yomi, the underworld. When Izanagi followed her to try to bring her back, he saw her decomposing body and fled in horror. Betrayed and furious, Izanami declared she would take 1,000 lives every day from the world above. Izanagi responded that 1,500 new lives would be born each day to counter her. That exchange became the mythological explanation for why death and birth exist in balance. Izanami did not begin as a death goddess. She became one through grief, which gives her a different weight than most figures in this space. Mot. Mot is the god of death in ancient Canaanite and Ugaritic religion, and he is one of the few death deities in ancient mythology who is portrayed as genuinely monstrous. His name simply means death in the Semitic languages, and he ruled the underworld with no particular compassion or nuance. He was the enemy of Baal, the storm god, and their conflict forms the center of one of the oldest mythological cycles known to scholars. Mot swallowed Baal whole in one version of the story, sending the world into drought and stillness. Baal's sister Anat eventually defeated Mot, grinding him up and scattering him across a field, which mirrors the agricultural cycle of death and renewal. Unlike Anubis or Yama, Mot is not a judge. He is an appetite. He consumes, and the only thing that stops him temporarily is force. Osiris. Osiris is one of the most important figures in Egyptian religion, and while he is often called a death god, his role is more nuanced than that title suggests. He was originally a god of agriculture and fertility, killed by his brother Set, and later resurrected through the efforts of his wife Isis. Because he died and returned, he became the ruler of the dead, a king of the afterlife rather than a figure of death itself. Souls in Egyptian belief wanted to become one with Osiris, meaning they hoped to share in his resurrection and live eternally in his kingdom. He was depicted with green skin, symbolizing renewal, wrapped in white mummy bandages. He held the crook and flail of kingship. What separates Osiris from other death figures is that he represents the possibility of life after death, not an end, but a continuation. He is less a reaper and more a destination.